Last Tuesday evening, I overheard my 3 adult children arguing in my kitchen about when I was finally going to die so they could divide up my estate, with my eldest son Michael telling his siblings that I was being selfish by staying alive at 75 years old when they needed their inheritance money to solve their financial problems, and my daughter Sarah agreeing that I should stop being so stubborn about clinging to life when my death would benefit the whole family. What my ungrateful children didn't know as they discussed my inconvenient longevity was that I had been secretly planning an elaborate fake death scheme for months, complete with a hired funeral director, forged death certificate, and hidden cameras throughout my house to record their true reactions to my supposed demise and reveal their real priorities about money versus family love. I'm Harold Peterson. I'm 75 years old, and this is the story of how I faked my own death to expose my children's greed and taught them the most shocking lesson about family loyalty and respect that they'll never forget for the rest of their lives. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The foundation of this disturbing family situation begins 18 months ago when my beloved wife Alina passed away from cancer after a long and difficult battle, leaving me alone in our family home in Sacramento, California, with substantial assets including our paid-off house, investment portfolios, life insurance policies, and business interests that had accumulated significant value during our 48 years of marriage and my successful career as a civil engineer and construction company owner. Alina and I had raised 3 children together. Michael, who is 52 years old and works as a middle manager at an insurance company. Sarah, who is 49 and has struggled with various business ventures and financial setbacks throughout her adult life. And David, our youngest at 46, who works as a high school teacher and has always lived paycheck to paycheck despite his stable employment and our repeated offers of financial assistance over the years. During Alina's illness, our children showed appropriate concern and support, visiting regularly, helping with medical appointments, and providing emotional comfort during the difficult months of chemotherapy treatments and hospice care that preceded her peaceful death at home, surrounded by family members who expressed genuine love and grief at her passing. The reading of Alina's will reveal that she had left modest bequests to each of our children, with the majority of her personal assets transferring to me as her surviving spouse, along with clear instructions that I should use our combined wealth to enjoy my remaining years and make decisions about inheritance distribution based on our children's demonstrated maturity and financial responsibility over time. Alina's funeral was attended by hundreds of friends, family members, and business associates who remembered her as a generous, loving woman who had contributed significantly to our community through volunteer work, charitable donations, and mentorship of young families. And our children appeared genuinely grieved by their mother's death and supportive of my adjustment to widowhood. During the months following Alina's funeral, I noticed gradual but concerning changes in my children's behavior toward me, with increasing frequency of conversations about my financial assets, my estate planning documents, and subtle suggestions that I should consider updating my will to provide more immediate access to inheritance funds that could help them address their current financial challenges and life goals. Michael's interest in my finances became particularly pronounced, with regular visits that included detailed questions about my investment accounts, property values, life insurance policies, and business ownership stakes, along with suggestions that I might want to begin transferring assets to avoid estate taxes and ensure that my children could benefit from their inheritance while I was still alive to see their happiness. Sarah's financial difficulties became more apparent and more pressing, with requests for loans and gifts that revealed substantial credit card debt, failed business investments, and poor financial decision-making that had left her struggling to maintain her lifestyle and meet her basic living expenses despite her 49 years of age and decades of opportunities to establish financial stability. David's approach was more subtle but equally concerning, with comments about the financial stress of supporting his family on a teacher's salary and observations about how inheritance money could provide his children with educational opportunities and financial security that his current income couldn't support, though he avoided direct requests for immediate financial assistance. The children's conversations about my finances and their inheritance began to dominate our family interactions, with less attention to my emotional well-being as a widower and more focus on practical matters related to asset management, estate planning, and the timeline for wealth transfer that would address their various financial needs and long-term security concerns. 6 months after Alina's death, I discovered that my children had been meeting privately to discuss my financial situation and their inheritance prospects, with detailed research into the value of my assets and calculations about how my wealth should be divided among them based on their different needs and their contributions to the family over the years. The discovery of their private inheritance discussions was disturbing and hurtful, as it revealed that their increased attention and frequent visits were motivated primarily by financial considerations, rather than genuine concern for my well-being or desire to maintain close family relationships during my adjustment to life without their mother. Michael had apparently taken the lead in these discussions, using his insurance industry knowledge to research the value of my life insurance policies and his general business experience to estimate the worth of my construction company ownership and investment portfolios, information that he shared with his siblings to facilitate their inheritance planning. Sarah's contributions to these family meetings focused on her immediate financial needs and her arguments for why she deserved a larger share of the inheritance due to her current difficulties and her greater financial vulnerability compared to her brothers, who had more stable employment and fewer debt obligations. David's participation included research into estate tax implications and suggestions for legal strategies that could maximize the inheritance value available to the 3 siblings, while minimizing tax obligations and administrative complications that might reduce the actual wealth transfer from my estate to their individual accounts. The children's inheritance planning discussions also included timeline considerations, with calculations about my life expectancy based on actuarial tables and family health history, along with speculation about whether my assets would continue to grow or might decline in value depending on market conditions and my spending patterns during my remaining years. These conversations revealed a disturbing level of detailed financial planning based on my anticipated death, with little consideration for my current happiness, my potential longevity, or the possibility that I might choose to spend or donate significant portions of my wealth, rather than preserving it exclusively for their inheritance benefits. The most shocking discovery came when I accidentally overheard a phone conversation between Michael and Sarah, in which they discussed their frustration with my continued good health and their concern that I might live for many more years, potentially spending down their inheritance or making financial decisions that would reduce the wealth available for transfer to the next generation. Michael's comments during this conversation included complaints about my selfishness in maintaining an expensive lifestyle and my failure to consider how my spending choices affected their future financial security, along with suggestions that I should move to a more modest living situation to preserve more of my wealth for their inheritance. Sarah's responses revealed even more disturbing attitudes, with direct statements about wishing I would hurry up and die so they could access their inheritance money, and complaints about the inconvenience of waiting for my death when they had immediate financial needs that could be solved by accessing their share of my estate. The callousness and greed revealed in their private conversation was devastating and completely contrary to the loving, supportive family relationships that Alina and I had worked to build throughout our children's lives, demonstrating that our efforts to raise grateful, caring children had failed to instill basic values of respect and family loyalty. This discovery prompted me to begin covert surveillance of my children's communications and behavior, using recording devices and private investigation techniques to gather evidence of their true attitudes toward me and their motivations for maintaining contact and expressing concern about my well-being and living arrangements. The surveillance revealed extensive conversations about my financial assets, detailed planning for asset division after my death, and increasing resentment about my continued survival and my failure to take steps to accelerate the inheritance transfer process that would solve their various financial problems and provide them with the lifestyle improvements they believed they deserved. Michael's communications included research into methods for encouraging elderly parents to make early wealth transfers, along with strategies for convincing me to modify my living arrangements in ways that would reduce my expenses and preserve more wealth for inheritance purposes, while also potentially shortening my lifespan through reduced quality of life and social isolation. Sarah's conversations revealed increasingly desperate financial circumstances and growing anger toward me for failing to provide immediate financial assistance or early inheritance distributions that would solve her debt problems and allow her to maintain her preferred lifestyle without the stress and limitations of financial constraints. David's communications were more subtle but equally disturbing, with discussions about the ethical implications of encouraging elderly parents to prioritize their children's financial needs over their own comfort and happiness, and rationalizations for why I should feel obligated to sacrifice my remaining years to benefit my children's financial circumstances. The evidence gathered through surveillance also revealed that my children had consulted with attorneys about legal options for challenging my mental competency or obtaining guardianship authority that would give them control over my financial decisions and accelerate their access to inheritance funds through court-ordered asset transfers. These legal consultations included detailed discussions about strategies for documenting my alleged mental decline or incompetency, with plans to use my age and widower status as evidence that I was no longer capable of making sound financial decisions, and required court-appointed guardianship to protect my assets from poor judgment or exploitation. The discovery of their legal consultations and their willingness to pursue guardianship proceedings against me was the final betrayal that convinced me to implement my elaborate fake death plan, which would reveal their true character and provide irrefutable evidence of their greed, callousness, and complete lack of genuine love or respect for their father. The fake death plan required months of careful preparation, beginning with consultations with my own attorney about legal protections and documentation that would ensure my scheme didn't violate any laws or create legal complications that could undermine my goals or result in criminal charges against me for fraud or deception. My attorney's guidance included recommendations for hiring professional services that could create convincing but ultimately harmless documentation, such as temporary death certificates and funeral arrangements that would appear authentic to my children, while maintaining legal safeguards that would protect me from serious legal consequences when the truth was revealed. The next phase involved hiring a retired funeral director named Thomas Reynolds, who specialized in providing services for elaborate pranks and practical jokes involving fake deaths, with experience creating convincing funeral arrangements that could fool family members while maintaining safety protocols and legal protections for all participants in the deception. Thomas's services included temporary embalming procedures that would create the appearance of death while maintaining my safety and health, along with coordination with a medical professional who could provide sedatives and monitoring to ensure that my fake death appeared convincing without creating actual health risks or permanent harm to my body. The fake death plan also required extensive preparation of my home, with hidden cameras and recording equipment that would capture my children's true reactions to news of my death, their conversations about inheritance distribution, and their behavior during the period when they believed I was deceased, and they were free to express their honest feelings about my passing. The camera installation was performed by a professional security company that specialized in covert surveillance systems, with high-definition recording equipment placed throughout my house to capture audio and video evidence of my children's activities and conversations during the period immediately following my supposed death announcement. Additional preparation included arrangements with my bank and financial institutions to temporarily freeze my accounts and prevent any immediate access to my assets, while maintaining legal protections that would allow me to regain control when I revealed that my death had been faked and my children's inheritance expectations were premature. The timing of my fake death was carefully planned to coincide with a period when all 3 children would be available to respond to the death notification and participate in funeral arrangements, ensuring that I would capture their complete reactions and any discussions or planning they might undertake in response to their sudden inheritance windfall. On the scheduled day, Thomas Reynolds arrived at my home with his mobile embalming equipment and medical support staff, administering carefully controlled sedatives that would create the appearance of death while maintaining my vital signs at levels that were undetectable without professional medical examination, but safe for my continued health. The fake death procedure involved temporary chemical treatments that created the appearance and physical characteristics of recent death, including appropriate body temperature reduction, skin discoloration, and muscle relaxation that would convince casual observers, including my children, that I had died peacefully in my sleep. Thomas's team also arranged my body in my bedroom in a natural position that suggested peaceful death from natural causes, with appropriate staging of prescription medications and personal items that would support the appearance that I had passed away due to age-related health decline rather than any suspicious circumstances. The death notification process began with a call to emergency services reporting that I had been found deceased in my home, followed by the arrival of paramedics and a coroner's representative who were part of the elaborate scheme and provided official documentation of my supposed death for legal and administrative purposes. Michael received the first phone call about my death from Thomas Reynolds, who identified himself as the responding paramedic and explained that I had been found deceased in my bedroom, apparently having passed away peacefully during the night from natural causes consistent with my age and general health condition. Michael's immediate response to the death notification was not grief or shock, but rather a series of practical questions about the status of my assets, the location of my will and financial documents, and the timeline for accessing my bank accounts and investment portfolios, revealing that his primary concern was securing inheritance access rather than mourning, his father's death. Sarah's reaction to Michael's call about my death was similarly focused on financial matters, with immediate questions about the value of my estate and her share of the inheritance distribution, along with expressions of relief that her financial problems would finally be solved through access to her inheritance money. David's response included more appropriate expressions of sadness and grief, but also included practical discussions about funeral costs and suggestions that the funeral expenses should be minimal to preserve more of the estate value for inheritance distribution among the three siblings, rather than spending money on elaborate memorial services. The hidden cameras captured my children's arrival at my house within hours of the death notification, with their behavior and conversations providing shocking evidence of their true priorities and their complete lack of genuine grief or emotional response to their father's supposed death. Michael's first actions upon entering my house involved immediate searches for my financial documents, safe combinations, and important papers related to my assets and estate planning, demonstrating that his priority was securing control over my wealth rather than paying respects to my body or processing the emotional impact of my death. Sarah's behavior included detailed examination of my personal possessions and household items, with calculations about their resale value and discussions with her brothers about how to divide valuable items among themselves, while maximizing the cash value available from my estate liquidation. David's actions were somewhat more respectful, but still primarily focused on practical matters, including research into funeral costs and suggestions for economical arrangements that would minimize expenses and preserve inheritance value, rather than planning memorial services that would honor my life and provide appropriate tribute to my contributions to the family and community. The conversations captured by the hidden cameras revealed the depth of my children's greed and their shocking callousness about my death, with detailed discussions about inheritance distribution that showed no evidence of grief, sadness, or appreciation for my role as their father and provider throughout their lives. Michael's statements included expressions of relief that I was finally dead and complaints that I had taken too long to die, along with calculations about how my death would solve his financial problems and provide him with the resources he needed to improve his lifestyle and secure his retirement plans. Sarah's comments were even more disturbing, with direct statements about being glad that I was gone and excitement about finally accessing the money she believed she deserved, along with complaints about the inconvenience of funeral arrangements and her desire to liquidate my assets as quickly as possible. David's contributions to these conversations revealed his agreement with his siblings' priorities, despite his more subdued emotional response, with suggestions for efficient estate settlement procedures and strategies for minimizing taxes and administrative costs that would reduce the inheritance value available for distribution. The most shocking revelation came when the cameras captured Sarah's statement that they should have found a way to accelerate my death years earlier, followed by Michael's agreement and suggestions about methods they could have used to encourage me to die sooner, including isolation, stress, and neglect that might have shortened my lifespan. These conversations provided irrefutable evidence that my children viewed me as an obstacle to their financial goals, rather than as a beloved family member whose life had value independent of his wealth, and that they had actually considered ways to hasten my death for their financial benefit. The cameras also captured their detailed planning for estate liquidation, with discussions about selling my house, liquidating my investment accounts, and dividing my personal possessions based on monetary value rather than sentimental significance or family history that might have motivated more respectful treatment of my belongings. Their conversations included no references to positive memories of our family life, appreciation for my support and guidance throughout their lives, or acknowledgement of the sacrifices Alina and I had made to provide them with educational opportunities and financial security during their childhood and young adult years. The fake funeral arrangements provided additional opportunities to observe my children's behavior and priorities, with their responses to funeral planning revealing continued focus on cost minimization and inheritance preservation, rather than creating appropriate memorial services that would honor my life and provide comfort to family friends and community members who had known and respected me. Michael's approach to funeral planning included research into the cheapest possible burial options and suggestions for eliminating traditional memorial services, flowers, and other expenses that he characterized as wasteful spending that would reduce the inheritance value available for distribution to my children. Sarah's contributions included complaints about the cost of funeral announcements and suggestions that they should limit the guest list and reception expenses to preserve more money for inheritance distribution, along with proposals for selling my personal belongings immediately after the funeral to generate additional cash for division among the siblings. David's funeral planning focused on practical arrangements and timeline considerations, with suggestions for scheduling services quickly to minimize ongoing expenses and administrative complications that might delay their access to inheritance funds or create additional costs that would reduce the estate value. The behavior of my children during the fake funeral preparations provided additional evidence of their complete lack of genuine affection or respect for me, with their conversations revealing that they viewed the funeral as an inconvenient expense and administrative requirement, rather than as an opportunity to celebrate my life and express gratitude for my contributions to their lives and the community. After 3 days of recording my children's shocking behavior and conversations, I decided that I had gathered sufficient evidence of their true character, and that it was time to reveal my fake death and confront them with the proof of their greed, callousness, and complete failure to demonstrate appropriate family loyalty and love. The revelation was planned for the morning of my scheduled funeral service, when my children would be gathered at the funeral home to finalize arrangements and would be completely unprepared for my dramatic return from the dead and the confrontation with evidence of their disgraceful behavior during my supposed final days. Thomas Reynolds coordinated the dramatic revelation, with arrangements for me to appear at the funeral home during my children's final meeting with funeral staff, creating maximum shock value and ensuring that my children would be forced to confront their behavior in front of witnesses who could verify their reactions and responses. The moment of revelation occurred when I walked into the funeral home conference room where Michael, Sarah, and David were meeting with funeral staff to finalize my burial arrangements, with their expressions of shock, confusion, and terror providing immediate confirmation that they understood the implications of my return from the dead. Michael's initial reaction was complete disbelief and stammering attempts to understand how I could be alive when they had seen my body and received official death notification, followed by growing awareness that he had been caught in a compromising situation that revealed his true priorities and character. Sarah's response included hysteria and accusations that I had committed fraud and deception, along with immediate concerns about whether her statements and behavior during my supposed death had been recorded and could be used as evidence of her inappropriate attitudes and priorities. David's reaction was more subdued but equally shocked, with visible embarrassment and growing understanding that his participation in his siblings' inheritance planning and his failure to demonstrate appropriate grief had revealed his true character and priorities to his supposedly deceased father. My confrontation with my children began with a detailed explanation of my fake death plan and my motivations for implementing such an elaborate scheme to test their character and reveal their true feelings about family relationships versus financial considerations. I explained that the hidden cameras had recorded all of their conversations and behavior during my supposed death, providing irrefutable evidence of their greed, callousness, and complete lack of genuine affection or respect for their father, along with shocking revelations about their willingness to consider methods for hastening my actual death. The presentation of video evidence from the hidden cameras was devastating and undeniable, with clear recordings of their conversations about inheritance distribution, their expressions of relief about my death, their complaints about my inconvenient longevity, and their detailed planning for asset liquidation that demonstrated their priorities and values. Michael's attempts to deny or rationalize his recorded statements were futile and unconvincing, as the video evidence clearly showed his immediate focus on financial matters rather than grief, his expressions of relief about my death, and his suggestions for accelerating access to inheritance funds through efficient estate settlement procedures. Sarah's response to the video evidence included desperate attempts to claim that her statements had been misunderstood or taken out of context, followed by angry accusations that I had violated their privacy and manipulated them into revealing their honest feelings through deceptive and cruel methods. David's reaction to the recorded evidence was more introspective and remorseful, with acknowledgement that his behavior had been inappropriate and that his focus on practical matters had revealed his failure to maintain appropriate emotional responses and family loyalty during what he believed was a time of genuine loss and grief. The confrontation continued with my detailed explanation of how their behavior during my fake death had completely destroyed my trust in their character and my confidence in their ability to handle inheritance responsibilities in ways that would honor the values and principles that Alina and I had tried to instill throughout their upbringing. I explained that their immediate focus on financial gain rather than emotional processing of loss, their callous expressions of relief about my death, and their detailed planning for asset liquidation had revealed fundamental character flaws that made them unsuitable recipients of the wealth that Alina and I had accumulated through decades of hard work and financial discipline. The revelation of their recorded conversations about hastening my actual death was particularly devastating and provided justification for my decision to completely reconsider my estate planning and inheritance distribution in ways that would reflect their demonstrated priorities and character, rather than my previous assumptions about their love and respect for family relationships. Michael's attempts to apologize and rationalize his behavior were unconvincing and revealed continued focus on preserving his inheritance prospects rather than genuine remorse for his callousness and disrespect, with suggestions that his statements had been misinterpreted and that his primary concern had always been honoring my memory and managing my estate responsibly. Sarah's response included alternating between desperate apologies and angry accusations, with claims that financial stress had influenced her statements and behavior, followed by arguments that I had been unfair and manipulative in testing their character through deceptive methods that didn't reflect normal family circumstances. David's apology appeared more genuine and included acknowledgement of his inappropriate priorities and his failure to demonstrate appropriate emotional responses, though his remorse seemed motivated more by concern about inheritance consequences than by genuine understanding of his moral and ethical failures as a son. The immediate consequences of my fake death revelation included my announcement that I was completely revising my estate planning and inheritance distribution to reflect my children's demonstrated character and priorities, with the majority of my wealth being redirected to charitable organizations and community causes that would honor Aliner's memory and values. The new estate plan included minimal inheritance distributions to my children, sufficient to provide basic financial security, but not enough to solve their financial problems, or provide the lifestyle improvements they had been anticipating through access to their full inheritance shares that they had calculated and planned to receive. Michael's reaction to the revised inheritance plan was anger and accusations that I was being vindictive and unfair, with arguments that his statements during my fake death didn't reflect his true feelings, and that he deserved his full inheritance share based on his contributions to the family and his status as my eldest son. Sarah's response included hysteria and threats of legal action to challenge my revised estate plan, with claims that I was mentally incompetent and that her brothers should support her efforts to restore their original inheritance expectations through court proceedings that would overturn my new financial arrangements. David's reaction was more resigned and reflective, with apparent understanding that his behavior had consequences, and that my revised estate planning reflected legitimate responses to their demonstrated character flaws and inappropriate priorities during what they believed was my time of death. The long-term impact of my fake death experiment extended beyond inheritance issues to complete transformation of my relationships with my children, with the trust and respect that had previously existed being permanently damaged by their revealed attitudes and priorities during my supposed final days. Michael's ongoing relationship with me became strained and distant, with his continued resentment about the revised inheritance plan and his inability to accept responsibility for his inappropriate behavior creating barriers to meaningful family communication and connection that persisted despite my attempts to rebuild our relationship on more honest foundations. Sarah's relationship with me deteriorated further due to her continued anger about the inheritance changes and her refusal to acknowledge that her behavior during my fake death had been inappropriate and hurtful, leading to extended periods of no contact and bitter family conflicts that affected relationships with other family members and friends. David's relationship with me showed more potential for recovery, with his apparent understanding of his mistakes and his efforts to demonstrate genuine care and concern for my well-being rather than focus exclusively on financial considerations. Though rebuilding trust required significant time and consistent demonstration of changed priorities and values. The fake death experiment also revealed important information about my children's relationships with each other, with evidence that their inheritance planning had created competition and resentment among siblings who had previously maintained supportive and cooperative family relationships that Alina and I had believed were genuine and enduring. The charitable organizations that became the primary beneficiaries of my revised estate plan included causes that Alina and I had supported throughout our marriage, with specific focus on educational scholarships, community development programs, and healthcare initiatives that would provide lasting benefits to people who demonstrated the values and character that our children had failed to maintain. The community response to my fake death revelation and the subsequent inheritance changes was generally supportive, with friends and business associates expressing understanding for my disappointment in my children's behavior, and approval for my decision to redirect my wealth toward charitable causes that would honor Alina's memory and contribute to community welfare. The legal implications of my fake death scheme were carefully managed through my attorney's guidance, with documentation and procedures that ensured no laws were violated, and no criminal charges could be filed against me or my collaborators in the elaborate plan to test my children's character and reveal their true priorities. Today, 3 years after my fake death experiment, my relationships with my children remain strained but have shown some gradual improvement, particularly with David, who has demonstrated genuine efforts to rebuild trust and show appropriate concern for my well-being, rather than focus exclusively on financial considerations and inheritance prospects. The revised estate plan remains in effect, with the majority of my wealth designated for charitable distribution upon my actual death, though I have provided some opportunities for my children to demonstrate changed character and values that could result in modest increases to their inheritance shares if they show genuine growth and maturity. The lessons learned from my fake death experiment continue to influence my approach to family relationships and financial planning, with greater emphasis on character evaluation and demonstrated values, rather than assumptions about family loyalty and affection that may not reflect reality when significant financial stakes are involved. My actual death, when it eventually occurs, will be clearly documented and verified through proper medical and legal procedures, ensuring that my children understand the difference between my previous fake death and genuine end-of-life circumstances that will trigger actual inheritance distribution according to my carefully planned estate arrangements. The fake death experience also provided valuable insights into the corrupting influence of inheritance expectations on family relationships, demonstrating that significant wealth can create perverse incentives that undermine genuine affection and respect between family members who might otherwise maintain loving and supportive relationships throughout their lives. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.